that up right now, I'm fine.
Yeah, I just got to get, Blackboard still hasn't gotten back to me with the recovered archives.
Right, it's okay. I'm good right now.
Okay.
That's really my only concern for the next couple of weeks, assuming we can get Henryville up and running on this system.
Okay.
So they're now off again?
So they're on, it's just we can't, their video camera is not working for them right now.
Yeah, I understand that, but I don't even see them listed anywhere.
I see Political Science 101 listed.
I don't. I have in the past, but I don't now.
Okay. Henryville, can you talk to us, please?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
Okay.
Now I see them.
Okay.
Okay, if they can hear me, I mean, is their video issue something that they can resolve in 2 or 3 minutes?
They're going to have to get their IT people to reinstall their video camera, probably.
So what are we talking about? Should I just go ahead and talk?
Yeah, you just can't see them.
I understand that.
Right.
They can't see me either, right?
No, they should be able to see the, I'm assuming that they can see the screen and everything. They were able to see me.
I don't know. Let's ask them.
Hey, we can see you.
Henryville, can you see the PowerPoint slide on your computer screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Then I think we should go ahead and let me talk. Okay? Lacey?
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you very much. Henryville, good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, please let me know if you need me to speak louder or more quietly. We have a number of uh-oh. Where is this? Hang on one second. Okay. We have a number of items to take care of today, a lot of house cleaning. First of all, students, I would like you to check your email regularly. There is an email there for you from me. Secondly, I would like you to check the messages that I posted on the discussion board help forum and on the announcements page on Blackboard. Both of those, the help forum on the discussion board and announcements, are on the Blackboard website once you log in. In the help forum, you will find my effort with the help of Ms. Cousin to and your staff at the high school to reorganize the course calendar and get things moving. And the information there will help you see how the course calendar has been changed, what my expectations are in terms of your reading, the cancellation of the additional class participation assignment that I haven't talked about yet because I was concerned about this video stuff and I want to make sure that you have access to all the course material. I have gone through everything for the first 8 chapters and class sessions, and in the help forum discussion board you will see a list of, and you should make sure your faculty and staff sees this as well, a list of the days that we will meet. They're almost all gold days that we will meet in the rest of February and the first half of March. Basically, what you need to expect is all of the assignments, paper assignments, remain the same. The discussion board and their due dates remain the same. The discussion board follows the speed with which we do the chapters, and you're going to have to do the first 8 chapters by the middle of March. And that's not much of a change. I've also indicated where the gaps in the video lectures are, and I will be filling those gaps in. So I've got all of this information laid out for you for the first 8 chapters, and then once I get this in hand, then I'll start working on the back half, the second half of the course. But everything up to your break, or your travel week before the break, is now laid out there for you to see. The next live class will likely be February 23rd and February 27th. If you have questions, once you read the announcements, and keep in mind I did this over a period of hours, so that when you read the announcements and you read the messages on the help forum and your email, keep in mind the time at which they were written, because they're all updated one after another. And the most recent is the fullest explanation of what your responsibilities are, what the calendar is, the timing, when we're going to be meeting again, and so on. So today is February 11th, and then I'm anticipating that the next meeting is, again, February 23rd at 9:30. And hopefully that 12-day gap will give the staff at the school enough time to address and to get updated in terms of getting this working for you guys in a speedy way. And you guys your staff should be working with Ms. Kuzin at Ivy Tech Sellersburg to see that that's done, so that we don't have these continuing problems, because I know it can't make life for students any easier. And my job is, I don't want to make your life too easy, but I definitely want you to not have to worry about the technology being available and accessible at the school and at your homes and at the Sellersburg campus or a public library or what have you. So do you have any questions about that? Bottom line is, what I want you to do is go to the help forum, look at your email, look at the announcements, but especially the help forum on the discussion board on Blackboard. Read what I've written in terms of the expectations, the calendar, and so forth. And if you have questions or concerns, please post them on the help forum on the discussion board in response. I will answer in very short order, so that you know what you need to do and where you're going. Any comments or questions right now? Can you hear me?
No, there's not. Yeah.
Okay. Any comments or questions?
No.
Okay. So right now you should have read through Chapter 3, which is the chapter on federalism. And you should have posted your federalism discussion board post. However, we have not had a session on a live session or just all you've had is video lecture. Let me ask you this. Have you been able to access all of the video lectures on the Constitution?
No, they have not been able to.
Okay. You should have been able to do that.
Dr. Ellison?
And yes.
This is Lacey. I spoke with their IT folks, and I was under the understanding that those links should work. So if they don't work from school to the YouTube videos and the ones that are there embedded, I need to know, because they are under the impression that they have lifted that security issue.
That's my understanding. There are, at this point, this is directed to the students primarily. There are two. What I need you to do is to go into class sessions, and there's week 1, week 2, week 3, and each week is a different chapter. And usually, as you get to a week or a chapter, it'll say PowerPoint, which is the full PowerPoint that I've posted that you should be able to see. And then there are videos. And most of those videos, I've gone through them the last 24 hours, and I can, and they're pretty complete, with the exception of a couple slides in federalism and a large number of slides in civil rights, which is chapter 5. So we need to know the various videos have two different ways to be accessed, and one is first there's a long list of links that you have to click on and paste into another into a search engine, into a tab, into a search tab on another web page in order to access it. But frankly, I haven't gone through all those, and there are a lot of duplications and there are a lot of gaps in those. But there are very few gaps in the if you just go week by week in class sessions. And under each class session, it says you have to make a post on the discussion board. There's a PowerPoint that you should be able to open, and there are multiple video lectures that are in each class session. So I need to know from the students, have you been at school and or at home and tried to open those video lectures in class session 1, in class session 2, and in class session 3? Hello?
They're
Henryville?
trying to access it right now. However, they're getting a message basically saying that the connection's reset, and they get like little symbols, like a unhappy face type thing. Is there another one?
And then the other one is pull up a login. Yeah, the other one pull up this page.
A login access.
Yeah.
Lacey, I'm going to try to, are you there, Lacey? Lacey? Henryville, can you see my my web page, Blackboard web page?
Yes, they can.
Okay, so if you go to class sessions here, can you see that? This is the long list of links. I wouldn't worry about those right now. I still have to work through those, and there are problems with them. But so this is chapter 1. So you have chapter 1 and the lecture, which is the PowerPoint lecture, which is here. And then you have the week 1 YouTube videos, which are here. So if you open that up, you click on it, and you open it up, and there you will see videos. Do they not work for you?
No.
Okay. Then you need to contact Jerry Smith I was in contact with him this morning, and he assured me that you all would be able to access those videos. Clearly, that is not the case. Can you access them from home?
No.
Okay. All right. That's what we need to know. So now we have serious problems. So I'm going to ask your staff member who's in the room with you to immediately contact Jerry Smith in your school. He's your technical person, and tell him that you are not able to access any of those videos, and that access needs to be provided now. Is that something you can do, sir?
I can make an attempt. There's no guarantee that he's going to be able to do it right now.
Well, no, I'm not expecting that he's going to do it right now, but he needs to do it very quickly, like in the next 24 hours. This was something. This is something that I raised last week, and I've been assured multiple times that it's taken care of, and apparently it's not. I have no way to know exactly whether it's.
I mean, I'm with you on this. We're kind of hamstrung ourselves.
It's very hard for me to hear you. If you could turn up your video, your audio, that would be helpful. Okay. I'm sorry, students, for this problem. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to change my what I was going to do this morning. You're not so far not able to access the videos. I've just asked your teacher there to talk with Mr. Smith. I will be sending an email to Mr. Smith and to other staff members, both at Ivy Tech and your high school, to try to address this problem. In the meantime, the only thing that I can do is that you've not been able to access even the rest of the introduction video for Chapter 1. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. So. Okay, so what I'm going to do is this. Until further notice, we are going to have a live class every morning, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, not Wednesday, starting next Monday. That was not what I was intending, because I was assured that you guys had access to the videos. If you do not, until you have access to the videos, we have to have live class every morning. Do you understand me?
What days did you say?
Okay, I'm going to start it again. The material that I posted assumed that you had access to the videos, because I was assured multiple times that you had access to the videos.
Hey, I just talked to
But you
Jerry
don't
Smith.
have access to the videos.
He said.
Go ahead.
He basically said that he's talked to Mrs. Neese, our counselor, and it said that somewhere along the way there's going to be coordination between Ivy Tech and us. It's kind of set up to test it out to make sure that it's actually going to work, so they can figure out as it's going. Then, other than that, that's pretty much what he told me.
Okay, well,
so there has to be some sort of communication where they can.
that's not what's working. If the students can't access it, they're saying they can't access it, it's not working. I was told multiple times it was working. This is a major problem. And it's a problem for your school right now.
I completely agree, and I realize that we're wasting your time.
No, here's what we're going to do.
I mean, it's
until you guys solve this problem, we're going to have live class, every single morning except Wednesday, until we catch up. In the meantime,
we do not have school on Monday.
Fine, then we'll start Tuesday. Then it'll be Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, unless the videos are accessible. So you're gonna you folks at Henryville are gonna have to let me know, and let the students in the class know when the videos are accessible. As long as the videos are not accessible,
that's no problem.
we're going to have to meet every morning that you have school, except for Wednesday, until we catch up. Because if we get too far behind, we're never going to be able to catch up. So what I'm going to do, I was going to talk about federalism this morning under the assumption that you had seen the video lectures, and you have not. You should have seen the PowerPoints for chapters 1, 2, and 3. If you haven't, students, you do have access to those, and you should, by the end of the day, have gone through them all. In the meantime, what we're going to do is I'm going to start lecturing on the Constitution, which is chapter 2, right now. And I'm going to finish, hopefully, the lecture on the Constitution on Tuesday. And if not, I'll finish it on Thursday. And then we'll proceed in the same way with class every day that school is in session, starting at 9:45, except for Wednesday, because I have a conflicting commitment. I can't do it tomorrow because I have another class tomorrow morning. So what we're going to do is we're going to move right into. You're going to have to give me a minute because I'm going to have to get the PowerPoint up, and then we'll start. We still have at least 25 minutes, or actually till 11, so we have 40 minutes.
This is the most frustrating thing in the world. Stuck in freaking rock and hard place. I mean, I get told to come into this, and I'm the one getting blamed for half this crap. Well, I mean, she would be bumping around like a fool right now.
Charles, are you trying to get back to the PowerPoint that you had loaded earlier?
I'm loading a different one.
Okay.
Did you hear the conversation?
No, I was dealing with a phone call from Henryville.
Okay, bottom line is the students have no video access, and Mr. Smith at Henryville, while he informed me on 2 occasions that it was available, is not available.
Right, and I've updated Mr. Smith on that one.
And that, you know, the main thing is we need to, we're going to have to meet every morning so that the students don't get too far behind, and the technology people are going to have to work with Henryville to get them up to speed. I don't know what else to do.
Yeah. Well, I've emailed Mr. Smith and I've spoken on the phone with Phyllis, so hopefully we'll get some things straightened out today.
All right. Okay, class. Can you see this slide on thinking about the Constitution?
Yes.
Okay, and we need you to turn up your audio. It is very hard for me to hear you. I don't know how well you can hear me, but I can barely hear you.
You should work at home and doesn't work at home.
Thank you.
I just work at my house.
Okay. So, I would like to begin talking about the Constitution. Before I do, I need to say two things. Number one, there is another part of the lecture for Chapter 1 that is not completed. And it is a very important piece of the course, and I will talk about that probably next time. So this is out of order. We talked about the first half of it. We had a class, live class last time that dealt with the first half of Chapter 1. But I'm going to skip ahead and start with Chapter 2, and then we'll come back next week to finish Chapter 1. People understand? Okay, point number 2. Still hard to hear me. Okay, point number 2 is this. Yeah, I did not prepare this morning. For this morning, I prepared another lecture on federalism, and so you will at some point be able to see the lecture, the video lecture on the Constitution. So I'm probably not going to be at my best this morning because I didn't prepare this, because I wasn't prepared for your lack of access to the video lectures, but I'll do the best I can. So we need to talk about the Constitution because the Constitution is an important framework for the understanding of American government. And often the way I teach this is to talk about the tensions or the conflicts that the constitutional framework provides, both historically and in terms of the document itself. So one of the important conflicts out of which the framers emerged was their experience with monarchy on the one hand and their commitment to limited government on the other. Monarchy, remember, the colonists fought a revolution against Great Britain. Great Britain was ruled by a king, King George III. One guy. As Mel Brooks says, it's good to be king unless you get a lot of people angry. And that's what George III did. And so the framers, if I were a psychohistorian, I would say the framers in a good bit of American political history is about a reaction against government by one person, or tyranny, or authoritarian rule, whatever you want to call it. And keep in mind that in Europe, both in England and the rest of Europe, when you were king or queen, and keep in mind that all of the rulers in Europe at the time were monarchs. at the time that we fought the revolution, they were not just kings and queens, they were also the head of the national religion. And if you know your American history at all, you know that many of the early colonists came to this country, or to this land, wasn't a country then, came to this land because they did not want the rulers of their own country controlling their religious belief and practice, because state and religion were merged in the Europe of the time. So, another conflict that Americans tend to forget is that when we did establish a government, we called it the Articles of Confederation. And if you read Chapter 2, you know that the Articles of Confederation existed for about 8 years between 1781 and 1789, and it failed. It failed for a number of reasons that are laid out in every American government introductory textbook, and some of which we'll probably talk about. But the main thing that it did is that it vested most of the governmental power in the states, and it failed to create a sustainable, meaningful national government. And so Madison and his pals got together a group of men who ultimately would be the framers. Initially, they were supposed to just amend it, and Madison, who did a lot of homework beforehand, if you want to control a meeting, it's always good to do a lot of homework beforehand. So he came with not just an idea, but a proposal. And the problem with the Articles of Confederation in grandest terms is that it failed to create a national government that had any substance. And so what the Constitutional Convention was about, and what the Constitution of the United States was about, is creating a document that made for a viable national government. I'm not going to go through this, but at the bottom of this slide there is a link to Wikipedia, which will give you an overview over time of how the relationship geographically between slave and free states changed. We're talking about the Constitution and how conflicts are reflected both in its historical backdrop and in the document itself. And one of the most fundamental, if not the greatest, conflict within the Constitution and within American ideology laid out in the Declaration of Independence boils down to all men are created equal, but slaves count as 3/5 of a person, and they have no rights as citizens. And what that link does is give you a way to look not just at the ideological contradiction within the Constitution, but also the geographic dimensions of slave and free states. And this is a problem, this is an issue that the framers simply could not resolve if they were to agree on a constitution, because a number of states, largely in the South, were slave states, and the northern states were not, and that reflected also dramatic economic differences between what would become a commercial and then an industrial north and a more agricultural south. And so You need to understand the Constitution as a political compromise, not as something that was ordained by God. There were problems that the framers couldn't solve, conflicts that were so deep and so divisive that they put it off. So again, thinking about the historical background of the founding, the major religions were central elements of many nations and empires and autocratic systems. And again, it's important to keep in mind that in the 18th century, when Jefferson wrote the Declaration, and after, the rulers in Europe were monarchs. They were understood as God's representative in the world, administering and governing nations and peoples with God's tacit approval. And those who adhered to other faiths, those who were not of the faith of the king or queen or ruler, were often persecuted and restricted in their practices. And that's one of the reasons people left. So, one of the reasons the United States is different, historically, is that we began to allow freedom of religion in which no specific beliefs or observances were required of the population, and none were required of political officials and candidates. We are people with many. We are a people that is religious, but we have always had many religions and no established state religions. That's one of the things in the late 18th century that made America different from Europe. And so this is a radical departure from America, was a radical departure in terms of separating religion and government by granting freedom to all religious groups. And this is really important. This is central to the American political experiment. It was unprecedented in Western history. So the framers resolved that America would be a secular republic. The Constitution clearly states in Article 6 that federal elective and appointed officials, quote, shall be bound by oath or affirmation to support this Constitution, but no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. The Constitution makes no mention of God or a deity, except a pro forma year of our Lord date. And the First Amendment forbids Congress from making laws that would infringe the free exercise of religion. This doesn't mean that it's always been adhered to in practice. But that's what the Constitution provides, and that's the historical context in which the Constitution was created. The framers understood the history of religious warfare that in part led to America's settlement. And they understood the dangers associated with mixing religious and political power. And so it was that their understanding of the divisive past that the founders that moved the founders to take the position they did with respect to separating out religion and national government. So, the American Revolution and Constitution were not just associated with various religious differences, but the colonies that were created and the Constitution that ultimately was formed was a struggle among economic interests and political forces at the time. The Constitution of the United States was not something that was kind of like handed down by God. It was a political document created in the political context of a failed nation-state framework, that is to say the Articles, where people with very different interests and points of view needed to hash out a new government and to embed that in a constitution. So if we go back in time from 1789, a few years, we have, of course, the Declaration of Independence, which laid out universal truths. Some of the key principles involved in the Declaration of Independence were human beings, including American colonists, have natural rights. What are natural rights? Natural rights, put simply, are rights that exist, that human beings have, all human beings have, prior to the formation of governments. And there's a notion of a social contract there, that people come together, work together, collaborate to create a contract both for human society and for the government, for the governance of society. And obviously, one of the major important factors of the Declaration of Independence is it is a Declaration of Independence from the British Crown. So what's in there? Some of the key values. Human equality. And again, this is a contradictory, a conflicting piece of American political history. Human equality. The most famous sentence of the Declaration of Independence is, quote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. They're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness," unquote. Human equality. The second key value is that people make and legitimize governments. God doesn't come down and say, okay, king, you're ruling in our name, and the king doesn't say, hey, God told me I'm ruling and you got to do what I tell you. Jefferson says the people make and legitimize governments, and they have a right to make a new government when governments do not serve the people's needs over an extended period of time. And that comes right out of John Locke. Comments or questions at this point?
Any comments, questions? No. They said no.
Okay. Still hard to hear you.
They said nothing.
Keep in mind. Much better. Keep in mind that after the Declaration of Independence through the Articles of Confederation, the colonies or the states were seen as sovereign. The Articles of Confederation didn't give a national government any power to speak of at all. And so our first form of government, starting in 1781, was essentially a voluntary association of independent states. And by the way, the states had different religious traditions and orientations. But the states retained most of the power. The central government was very weak. Citizens were basically loyal to their state. In fact, most of the states had their own currency. There was no national currency. So state X didn't even have to accept the currency of state Y and vice versa. And that was just one of the many problems associated with the Articles. So what the article's governmental model was a confederation where the states retained sovereign authority except for very few powers that were expressly delegated to a national government. The Congress itself was weak. Execution of the laws was left to individual states. The central government really had very little power and really could not address the needs of a new nation. Keep in mind, just for starters, just because the war was won and the colonies became independent didn't mean that there were no national defense needs, for example. So some of the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation: there was no national currency. Number two, many of the states refused to pay their war debts. This infuriated the framers. If you go back and do your research, one of the things you'll find is that the move away from the Articles to the Constitution that the framers led was driven in some significant way by the fact that the states refused to pony up money to cover war debts. Further, the national government was not assured of any revenues at all. It had no funding for the military. The government had a weak international status. There were no national courts or mechanisms to resolve disputes, and Shays' rebellion reflected a broad disorder about problems of debt and indebtedness that many lower and moderate income people and households and framers were experiencing. So there was the government's ability to maintain order was heavily compromised. So Madison did his homework. The framers began to think about to move from revising the Articles to calling for a new governmental system. The framers were mostly upper class. They were educated. They were younger rather than older. They met in total secrecy. It's not like they were out there sharing information, though they were writing essays and other documents to try to generate support for their cause, the most famous, of course, being the Federalist Papers. So the Constitution, you need to understand, is a political document that contains numerous compromises and was written with an eye toward ratification. In order for the Constitution of the United States to be adopted by the states, 9 states state legislatures had to approve the document. And the country, if you can call it that, was divided meaningfully. In fact, roughly 50-50. The anti-nationalists, those who were ready to continue to support something like a very weak national government, such as provided by the Articles, they were very strong in many of the states. And the framers, on the other hand, represented a much stronger nationalist majority. So there were a number of issues that the Constitutional Convention, number of conflicts that the Constitutional Convention and the framers had to address. And one, and some of you mentioned this in your discussion board posts, was the issue of representation. How were the people, how were the states going to be represented in the new national government? Well, the large states and their interests were represented by the Virginia Plan. Bottom line, Virginia, by large, by the way, what I meant is they have large population. So the states with large population, going along with the Virginia Plan, said, well, it's simple. You ought to represent people, citizens in the national government. And New Jersey, representing the smaller states, said, just hang on a minute here. We got 13 states. And we're all states. We're all equally sovereign. We're all equally legitimate. We should be representing states, not people. So what did the framers do? And the answer is they gave everybody what they wanted. And many times, and one should understand this effort to solve the problem of representation. And one way to understand it is that it's kind of a win-win. Everybody gets something. Every interest gets something of what they want. So the great compromise between the Virginia plan and the New Jersey plan was that we'll have a bicameral legislative body that we call the Congress. Simply put, the House of Representatives will represent population. The Senate will represent states. So each state in the Senate gets 2 senators. But in the House of Representatives, population is represented, so the states with the most people get more congresspersons than states with many fewer people. The problem of slavery is relevant to the issue of how should representation in the national legislature be constituted. Because slaves were far from randomly distributed across the country. Almost all were in the South, in the southern states. And here, what you have is a politics of avoidance and a politics of evasion on the part of the framers. This was an issue that could not be solved in 1789. They did not know how to solve this issue. And this issue was, of course, not just an issue, a conflict between all men are created equal except for slaves or black people. This is an issue that was a conflict between North and South. It was both an ideological and a strategic, political, and economic conflict that could not be resolved. But it needed to be resolved for the purposes of representation. Because in the House of Representatives, the great compromise was to accept the proposition that people should be represented in the House of Representatives. So, what the framers agreed was that every adult male slave would be counted as 3/5 of a person for the purposes of determining how many congresspersons states would have. So what this did was postpone the issue of slavery, which would become a political threat to the nation. And the Constitution, as initially drafted and ratified, in fact, nobody teaches this, in fact, provided an incentive for states to hold and import more slaves. If you're Georgia, if you're South Carolina, if you're Virginia, and you want more representation for the white men in those states, bring in more slaves. They count as 3/5 of a person. Of course, they can't vote, but your population count will increase. And as a consequence, your political power in the House of Representatives will increase as well. So one of the great moral and political difficulties in the Constitution at the time was that, in fact, it provided some incentive for states to get more and more and more slaves, up to a point. We have till a little before 11, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, thanks. So, why do constitutions even matter? In 1789, not too many governments had written constitutions. If you're king or you're an absolute ruler, you don't need a constitution. If you're a tyrant, you don't need a constitution. You do what you want to do. You say what you want to say. Your rule is law. Your voice is law. So by definition, at least in theory, what a constitution does is limit governmental power. I don't care what the Constitution says. The fact that it's written down, the fact that a constitution normally is understood to set up institutions and distribute powers to various institutions, means that a constitution, by definition, limits governmental power in some set of ways. Because if, on the other hand, if everything you say is the law of the land and nobody can say anything, you don't need to write anything down. Why do you need a constitution to say the king gets his way no matter what? You don't need a constitution. So a constitution as a founding document also means that we have a kind of legalistic political culture in the United States. What do I mean by that? Well, one thing it means is that when we disagree with something the government does, or when we don't like something the government proposes, or a political official proposes, one of the first things, and this is really, in my view, obnoxious, one of the first things people will say is, that's unconstitutional. That goes against the Constitution. And I wish I had a nickel for every person that said one or another thing is constitutional. Can I tell you something? Individual citizens don't get to determine what's constitutional and what's not. That's why we have courts, and that's why we have governmental institutions, and that's why we have the Supreme Court. So one can say, my view of constitutional principles and existing constitutional doctrine is inconsistent with proposal X, Y, or Z. But for some individual or group to say X, Y, or Z is unconstitutional is baloney. Citizens don't have power to determine that. Why else are constitutions important? Because in limiting governmental and political power, what our Constitution does is to reflect a fear of tyranny, a fear of concentrated power. If nothing else describes an important strain in American political culture and history, it is that Americans fear concentrated governmental or political power. That is a staple of American political culture. What is ironic and unfortunate, in my view, is that we haven't been smart enough, we haven't been imaginative enough to realize that lots of things can concentrate power. It's not just governments that can tyrannize. Lots of things can tyrannize. Lots of things can have concentrated power, or can represent concentrated power that can harm people or oppress people. Not just governments. So next time, what we want to talk about is constitutional design and constitutional principles. And hopefully we'll be able to get done with the lecture on the Constitution, Chapter 2, and get into Chapter 3. When you look at the PowerPoint for Chapter 3, Federalism, there are about 4 or 5 slides between 12 and 15 that are not available. I'll fill that in, but hopefully we'll get this video access problem resolved. In the meantime, again, go to the discussion board help forum, take a look at where we are, ask me any questions, make any clarification you need. I'll be happy to do that. And again, our next class will be Tuesday, 9:45. Even if the video access problem is solved, keep doing your work. Do not let this get you far behind in this course. That is always a bad idea. Keep checking to see if you can get access to the videos. I know the staff and the college will be working on this problem. Thank you. Have a nice day.
And before you leave,
Yes.
Dr. Ellison, I talked to Mrs. Neese and then RIT, and I guess they talked to Lacey. And on Tuesday morning at 8 a.m., they're going to test it and then make sure they're trying to fix the issues. So that's what we know of right now.
Okay.
Also, I've had some students that have been able to access the videos on their phone, but only on their phone.
Okay.
So I don't know what that means, but
Well,
that's
here's
never been able to
my
get through it on a computer.
Yeah. I guess I'm going to keep giving live classes every day except Wednesday because it is not right for me to assume that every student has an iPhone or, for that matter, even a computer that can access the information at home. So
Okay.
I'm going to keep holding a live class until we get this problem solved.
All right. No problem. Hopefully they resolve it Tuesday.
I hope so.
All right.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.